Hi there, I'm Bruce, creator of Dad's Castle Greeting Cards, and in this video we'll add geometry node eyelashes to my geometry node based eyelids, adapting an approach presented by Dean Yarkov. So let's get started. I have the project file open. Now we will dash through the creation of the eyelids because we have a previous tutorial on that. So let's select the eyeball, press 1 for front view, let's tab that into edit mode. Z for wireframe, A to select all, Shift D to duplicate, right click to keep it right where it was, rotate Z 90, enter, then select the invert, go over to vertex groups, add a vertex group, we'll call it vert.group.eyeball, assign, then H to hide, select all, Shift D, right click, H to hide those. Let's go into the side view with the 3 pad on the numpad. Select all the bottom vertices and delete those. Select all the top vertices, create a new vertex group. Let's call this one vert.group.top. Assign. Alternate H to bring everything back, alternate A to deselect everything. Now I'll select the eyeball over here, select the top, H to hide. Then this time we will select all the upper vertices and delete those. Select all the lower ones, create a new vertex group, vert.group.bottom. Assign. Now alternate H to bring them all back, alternate A, or just click off to the side to deselect everything. And then we will select the top vertices. Now let's go to the viewport shading mode. Let's press 1 to bring it back to a front view. Go to our material properties tab, click on skin, and then click on the new material to duplicate that. And let's call this skin.top. And the reason is I want a different color for the top eyelid than the bottom, so it's easier to troubleshoot as we move them around and control them. And later we can always put them back to whatever color you like. So we will assign that color to the top. Let's make that some just bluish so we can distinguish from the bottom. Back to our vertex groups, deselect those, select the bottom vertices, go back to our material tab, add another material slot, grab the skin, we can assign, and then back to the vertex groups, select the top again. The idea here is that we have just the top and bottom eyelid vertices selected, but not the eyeball. Then let's scale these up so that the eyeball doesn't interfere with the eyelids opening and closing. So we just scale that till all those little black dots of the eyeball disappear. Okay, now we're ready to start on our geometry nodes. So let's click on our geometry node tab up top, and we will drag this up to give us more working room. Let's move that over a little ways, move that down some, and change this from the outliner to a 3D viewport. Let's also make this a viewport shader, and then let's tab that back into object mode as well. Press 1 for front view. So now we have a pretty good preview of what we're doing over there. Now let's click on new geometry nodes. Let's add a set position node. Insert that there, assuming you have node wranglers activated. Let's add a rotate vector rotate actually. Set that somewhere in there. We will move these two over a bit, give some room. Then we'll add a position. Oops. here. Take the position out and plug it into the vector in. And change this from axis angle to x-axis. Move that up. And then plug the vector out into the position in. Now we still need to tell it which vertices to move with this vector rotate. So we'll take our selection, plug it into the empty socket over there, into our group input. Press N to bring up our menu panel. Click on the Group tab, click on Selection. Let's rename that divert.group.top. Now we can name it anything we want, but I like to keep the names consistent with the vertice groups so I know which goes with what. So over on our modifier properties panel, we'll click on the icon there, click in the field, and select vertex group top. Now we should be able to grab our angle here. Let's move it to the left and see our eyelid open over there in our preview on the right, on our 3D viewport. So that's working fine. Now we need to do the same thing for the bottom eyelid. So Shift D, plug that in there, grab these two, Shift D, move it over, vector into position, and like before, take this selection, plug it into the empty socket, move that down a little bit, and we will highlight the selection over here, rename it to vert.group.bottom, and over on our modifier properties panel, select the icon, select the field, and select the bottom vertex groups. We can test it, drag our angle to the right, and we'll see that eyelid open. Perfect. Now we want to control it from over here in the modifier properties panel. So we will take this angle out from this vector rotate, plug it into the empty socket over there, click on it over here on the inputs, and change the name to top.lid.open. Right? And now we can open it by dragging that left and right or entering a number in. It moves slower than when we use the angle over on the node, and that's because it has a subtype angle added to it. Now we can remove that and it'll open quicker, but the benefit of having that is it shows us the actual degrees. So if you want the actual degrees, you can leave that in there. Let's do the same thing for the bottom lid. Angle out, plug it into the empty socket. Find it over here in our inputs, rename it to bottom.lid.open. And there we go. We can open the bottom lid by dragging it back and forth. Reset that to 0 for the time being. Now I like my controls to be above the vertex groups, so let's come over to our panel here and just arrow them up. I'll do that throughout the whole tutorial. I'll keep all the vertex groups to the bottom and the controls above them. All right. So let's frame these up a bit. I should move those over just a touch. And I'll grab everything except for the group output, Control J. Go to the Node tab over here. And let's change the label to eyelid control. Let's give it a little bit of color. Something like that's fine. And then let's take this group output, GX, let's move it over a little ways. And now we're ready to start on the eyelashes. Now the eyelashes need to be anchored into a curve. Let's go back to our layout tab. Tab this back into edit mode. Z back into wireframe. And then I'll just click off to the right there to deselect everything. And we'll select over here our group eyeball select and our vertex group bottom select. H to hide those. So now we're left with just the top lid. And ideally what we want is our eyelashes to be anchored to this rim right there, that edge. So let's create a vertex group of just that edge. We'll type 3 in the numpad to get a side view, and these are the front ones right here. So we'll select those, just the bottom ones. Now we have a little bit of a problem with this extra highlighting, showing some influence either from these other vertices along the segment. But when we add the eyelashes, they try to anchor themselves everywhere it's highlighted. Now there may be a way to just select without that influence, but I'm not sure how to do that. So my workaround is Shift D, right click to keep it in the same place. And let's click over here for a new vertex group. And we'll call this one vert.group.lash base. Don't forget to assign it. So now we have a curved mesh to attach the eyelashes to. Let's go back to our geometry nodes. Okay, now we will start with adding a mesh to curve. And we'll set this down here somewhere. And to feed that, let's duplicate the set position node. Set it there. Let's feed it with the same geometry input. But because we want it to follow that curve of the upper eyelid rather, we'll take the vector out of this top eyelid and put this into the position for our set position. So now it'll follow that top eyelid, geometry out to mesh input of the mesh to curve, but we still need to tell it which vertices to connect to. So let's add a group input. Take the selection, plug it into the empty socket, go over to our group tab, scroll down until we find the selection, and let's name that one vert.group.lash-base. All right, then we go over to our modifier properties panel, click on the icon, click in the field, and select vertex group lash base, and that tells us which vertices to connect to. Hey, as we go along, I'm going to keep this very spread out in the geometry node tree so it's easy to see. And it's not the most compact way of doing it, but it's probably the easiest to see if there's an incorrect connection somewhere and to see what we're doing. So I'll drag that group output a little ways. So we'll use a lot of attributes from our curve. So we'll add a capture attribute. Put it down here somewhere. We'll need a bit of room. Let's add a spline parameter. Put it right below it. And we'll take the factor out, plug it into the geometry in, the value rather. There we go. Then the curve out to geometry in. We'll need to do this 3 more times. Shift D, set it there, change it from float to vector. All the remaining ones will be vector in this group, and it will be a position. So click add position, position out to value in, scoot that up a little ways. We can bring these down a little bit. We want to keep a clear path for the attribute. And geometry out to geometry in. Shift D, set it up there. This will be our curve tangent. Add curve tangent. Tangent out to value in. Scoot that up a little ways. Geometry out to geometry in. The last one of these, Shift D, put it up here. And this will be our normal. So we'll add search normal. And normal out to value in. Scoot that up. Need to scoot those both up a little bit more. Then geometry out to geometry in. And then last, we'll do curve to points. And this will create the anchor points for each eyelash, the individual ones. I'll put geometry out to the curve in. And this count here, it says count 10. That's how many anchor points we'll have, so it'll dictate how many eyelashes we have. So let's connect that all the way back here to an empty socket on our group input so we can control it from our panel on the right. And let's scroll down till we find that count, and we'll rename that lash count. And then let's move it up above the vertex groups. Then let's select all of those nodes, frame it up, Control J, go to the node, let's give it a label of base curve, give it some color, all right. And then let's move this down a little ways. We'll need some extra room there. Let's drag this over past here. Now we will use these attributes across our geometry tree. So I will drag some of these out to make them easy to get to. So on the curve tangent, let's drag that over here. Then our reroute, set it there, over at the label. Let's label that as tangent. Then we'll do the same thing for our position. Grab the attribute, drag it over, reroute, place it, and label it as position. Okay. Then we'll do the same thing with our spline attribute. I will set it right in between. Reroute, label that one spline. Select all of them, / to all endpoints. GX those over a little bit. And we will rename these the same as the other ones so we know what they connect to across the tree. Spline, position. I will select all three of those, GX, we'll move them over a little ways. Then we will also need the geometry output of here from our normal capture attribute. RE for reroute, place it there, and label that one, call it base curve. We will / it to add a reroute to all the outputs, GX, move it over, call this one also base curve. All right, and then let's also let's grab our normal attribute, just bring it out just a little ways here. Reroute, place it there, call it normal. All right. Then let's add a join geometry right to there. Move those over a little further. And then we'll add an instance to points. Or correction, actually an instance on points. That does make a difference. So we'll go instance on points. Just set that there. We'll take the points out of our curve to points, plug it into the instance on points, and take our instances out into the join geometry. And that sets up our curve so we can start adding eyelashes to it. Let's grab all three of those, move them a little more to the right to give us some room. Now we're ready to add some eyelashes. So to create an eyelash, we will add a curve line. All right, let's put it down here out of the way. And that just gives us a segment, but we would like to be able to curl that eyelash, so we need to add some extra segments to it. So let's resample that curve. Curve out to curve in. And we will need to make use of some attributes of that. So click Add, Capture Attribute. And the attribute we will capture, and we'll leave that as float, will be our spline parameter. Curve out to geometry in, factor to value. All right, let's move those over a little more. And we'll take the geometry out of their capture attribute and plug it into the instance in. And as soon as we do that, you'll see the eyelashes appear over here. Let's tab this back into object mode so it's easier to see. Now you can see all of our eyelashes highlighted. Little problem, they're heading the wrong direction. So we'll fix that in a moment, but first let's grab all of these, frame them up, Control J. Let's label these eyelash curve and give it some color. Maybe something like that. Drag it down here a little ways. All right. To line them up, let's add a line to Euler to vector. Line Euler to vector. Then let's duplicate that, Shift D. Rotation out to rotation in. We'll make this one the Z, keep that one the X. All right. And then we will attach the normal to the vector here, to the row. And then we'll take this tangent, plug it into the vector of the second one. And then we'll take rotation out and plug it into the rotation in. And as soon as we do that, you see our eyelashes over here all flattened out just like we want them to be. Let's frame these up, grab those two, Control J, call it align eyelash to base curve, give it some color, we'll leave that one default, that's fine. All right, there we go. Now we have some eyelashes, but they're all the same length. And we want to change the length. We can change the scale here if we like. Type 2. See, they all got bigger, but that's not really, Control Z to go back to 1. It's not really useful or practical that way. So let's add a math node. And we'll add it down here. Make this multiply. Let's move these out a little further. There we go. And we can take this value and plug it into the scale. And so we could adjust it from here as well. But the problem is, let's move that up just a little bigger, is that they're all the same length. If you look over here, they're all the same length, which might be okay on a round eyeball. But if we flatten this out and make it more cartoony, we want the eyelashes perhaps on the sides to be a little shorter than the eyelashes in the middle. Or maybe we want to emphasize more eyelash length on one side to make it more stylized for the left or the right eye. So we would like to vary that. So to do that, let's add a float curve. And we will take the value from the float curve, put it to the value, the top value of the multiply. And then we will take the spline parameter attribute from our original curve over here, this spline parameter attribute, and we can drag it actually from what we have here and plug that into the value here. And as soon as we do that, you can see that it follows the curve here. So we can change the shape of this a little bit. Let's bring that down. Let's move the middle one up. And now the edges on the eyelashes are very, very short, and the middle ones are longer. Now to control the length, let's add another group input. Set it here. Then we will take the value from our multiply, plug it into the empty socket there. Go to the group tab, hunt down to our value, just call that one length. All right, let's move it up above the vertex groups. And we can move this up here a little ways. I don't want to connect to there, so let's select all three of those, Control J to frame it up, go to our node tab, and let's call this one eyelash length. Give it some color, about some blue maybe. And I want to move this, we're going to need a lot more room, so we'll move this under our eyelash curve. Now we'd like to be able to move the eyelashes, wiggle them maybe left to right. Kind of like on an airplane, if the nose goes left to right, we call that the yaw. So let's give these eyelashes a little bit of yaw. All right. So to do that, we could just change the rotation a bit. So let's move these over a little more, give us a little extra room. We have our instance on points, so now let's add a rotate instances. I can spell and plug that in there. Now if we look at just the Y right here, if I adjust that, look at our 3D viewport on the right, you can see that those wiggle left to right just like we want them. So let's give a control to that. So we'll add, search, combine XYZ. And the vector out from here into the rotation. Move this over a little more. I'll just drag this down some. Then for the combine XYZ, let's add a group input. And we just want to move the Y. So we'll take the Y input, plug it into the empty socket there, group tab, scroll down till we find the Y, and we'll just turn that Y into yaw. All right, let's frame those up. Grab them both, Control J, go to the node tab, we'll call this one eyelash yaw. Go back to our group tab, let's move it above the vertex groups. And then we can also give that frame a little bit of color, maybe something like that. And let's move it down here out of the way. Okay. So So now we can adjust it over here in our modifier property panel. So that goes left and right, but now we want to go up and down and also add some curl. So we want to curl and rotate it. So to do that, it'll be similar to what we did with the eyelids a little bit. Let's move this out some more. GX. Give some working room. Let's add a realize instances. Connect that there. Add a capture attribute. Then the position. Okay, this we need to change from float to vector. Position out into the value there. Then similar to the eyelids, GX, let's move this over a little more. We'll add ourselves a set position. And then a vector rotate. The attribute out to the vector in, and the vector out to the position in. Okay. Now here's where that bus comes in a little handy. Let's grab all three of those. G, X, let's move those over here. All right. So our tangent will connect to the axis, and then our position will connect to the center. And now, if we move this angle, you can see it goes up and down, but it doesn't give us any curl. So to solve that, we will add another math node. We'll change this from add to multiply add. Then we'll add another group input. And we'll take the multiplier, plug it into the empty socket, go over to our group tab here, scroll down till we find it, and change the name from multiplier to curl. And then our add end will connect to the empty socket. Scroll down to find add in and rename that one to rotate. All right. And then we will, for the value, we'll take the eyelash curve attribute. So this one right over here, from the eyelash curve, take this attribute, drag it across, and plug it into the value there. Could have made another bus for that one as well. And then from here, we'll take the value out from the multiply add and plug it into the angle. As soon as we do that, you can see over here all of our eyelashes curled and bent down. So let's move these up above the vertex groups like we did before, and change these both to 0 over here on the modifier properties panel. Let's add a little bit of length just to make it easier to see. Now if we change the curl value, you can see it bends the eyelash. And if we change the rotate, it rotates it at the base of the eyelash where it attaches to the eyelash base curve. So now we can make it look a little more like an eyelash. Now let's frame this up. Grab those two, Control J, go over to our node tab, and we'll call this one curl and rotate. Except I can't spell, can't type, rotate. There we go. And give it some color. How about something more purplish this time, or violet? And I will move this over here a little ways out of the way. All right, so now we're starting to look like eyelashes, but they're just little sticks. We need to give them some thickness. So let's start by adding a curve radius, set curve radius, add, search, set curve radius. And we'll set that over here somewhere. Then we'll add a curved circle. Set that below it. And then a curve to mesh. Then we'll take the output of the set curve radius to the curve to mesh. We'll take the curve from the curved circle and put in the profile curve. And then we'll redirect this to our curve there. We'll cut that one with Control, right click. Let's move these over a little further. All right. And then we'll take the mesh output here into the join geometry there. And now you can see we're starting to have a little more shape to that. You know, it looks like now more like a straw rather than an eyelash. So let's add another math node. Change this to multiply. Then a float curve. And the value from here to the upper value of our multiply. Then we'll add another group input. And we'll take this value, plug it into the empty socket. I missed there. There we go, empty socket. Over to our group tab, roll down, find the value. Let's rename that to thickness, right? And then for the float curve value going in, we'll use that eyelash curve value again. So over here, we'll take the same eyelash curve value and plug it in to there. All right. And we can, let's frame those up a little bit. Control J, add a frame. We'll label this frame thickness. Give it some color. We haven't done about more of a pink, maybe. Something like that. All right. Move this down a little bit. We'll take the value from here and we'll plug it into our radius up there on the set curve radius. Now you see it kind of blew up over here. Our thickness, let's reduce that a bit. There you go. And let's move that up again by going over to our group panel, our group tab, arrow that up above the vertex groups. So you can see that the shape of the eyelash is following our float curve here. So let's make it look a little more like an eyelash. We'll drag that down, add something in the middle there, drag that one up a little bit maybe. There you go. Now we see it's looking a little more like an eyelash. All right. I'm going to drag this down over here, give us some more room to work with. And let's give it a few more. Let's change this count to maybe 25. Let's go 30. There we go. However, if we go back to our layout tab, back to material preview, and zoom in a little bit, you can see our eyelashes. If we raise the thickness a little bit, you can see the hollow ends of them sticking out. So let's add some thickness to the base curve so they attach to it or anchor in a little better. Let's go back to our geometry nodes. Let's add another set curve radius. We can just duplicate this one. We can actually just duplicate these two here, Shift D, and set it up here. We'll need to move these even more to the right. Let's move this one over here. And we can borrow the same curved circle from here. So we can plug it in. But we will use the base curve. So if you recall way back here where we pre-positioned that, let's just zoom out a bit and hit GX and move it over so it's handy right here. And then we can connect that to this curve input. Now we also want to define the shape a little bit. Let's move these down a little more. Move those over. GX, move those over. All right, so we'll add another math node. Change it to multiply. And take the value out and put it into the radius. And then we'll add another float curve. So it'll be pretty much just like the eyelash. As a matter of fact, we could have just copied those nodes and pasted them over here. But we'll use a slightly different profile. Value here to the value in. And then we will use this spline, remember that one? GX, move it over a little bit. And this spline will plug into our value there. Let's add a group input. And drag the value into the empty socket from our multiply. Scroll down, find that value, and we will call this one, how about base curve thickness? All right. Let's move that up above the vertex groups. And we can frame these four up. Control J. Go to the node. We'll call this one eyelash base curve thickness. Give it some color, green. And then let's drag those down a little bit. Move this one down a little bit out of the way. There we go. And then we need to add another join geometry. Shift D. Put this here. And then our mesh into there. And now you can see as soon as we do that, we have some curve going on. But it's thin down here, fat at the other end. So let's adjust our curve, our float curve, bring that down, bring that up in the middle maybe. Maybe not so dramatically. Bring that down to close the ends. And there we go. That's not looking bad. Now let's go over to our modifier properties panel. Let's just shrink that down a bit. And we can go into our layout mode. Yeah, not looking too bad. Anchoring that will make the thickness just a little more. All right. Now just to test all this, let's open our eyelid. And the eyelashes follow along. Open the bottom one. Now we got those really long. We can change the length down a little bit. Let's rotate those down some. Make them a little nicer. Curl them up a little more maybe. That's not looking too bad. But there's something missing. Color. We have no color. Let's give it some color. Let's add a set material node. Plug that in there. Go to our materials property. Add a new material slot. Click on new. Call this material eyelash. Let's click on the base color. Give it something, purpley. And then back in our geometry nodes, we'll just select eyelash. And there's our color. And there you have it. There's the whole tree. And we can go back into our modeling, our layout. And we have our eyelash. And I'm going to select the vertex group, actually the materials. Select that simple tune eye. That's pretty shiny. And let's bring down the specular of that a bit. Right click, shade smooth. There we go. So we can open and close. We can change the length. Change our lash count. Rotate it. And curl it. So the very last thing we want to do, let's make it a little more cartoony. Scale Y, flatten that out a bit. Scale Z, lengthen it maybe some. And now you can see when we do that, it really compresses the eyelashes. So we might want to give them a little more length. Let's rotate them up a little bit. And maybe reduce the curl some. There we go. And there you have it. So let me know if you liked the video. Please leave some comments below. Click on like. And we'll see you next time. And have a great day.